Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion Show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video. Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. I'm Gregory Harden II, and today I'm here with Ben Burgis, who is the host of the Give Them an Argument podcast and the author of the book Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. How about you, Gregory?
I'm doing great. It's pretty cool to have someone on my show who I used to watch in my dorm on Michael Brooks' show a few years ago. So it's a big deal for me. um, so first question I have here is, where are you from and where did you grow up at?
Yeah, I was born and raised in mid Michigan, so Lansing originally, then East Lansing. So which you can tell. I guess if this is only going to be audio, this doesn't. People can't see what I'm doing, but like I have an irresistible impulse to take out my hand and point it out on there because that's what people from there do to show where they come from in the state. But yeah, I grew up in mid Michigan, lived there until various parts of mid Michigan until like my mid 20s.
All right, cool. So what helped form your politics over the years as you got over? How did you become a leftist?
Yeah. Um, so I think that actually that's a hard question. I mean, I was a leftist before this, but I was politically active during the movement against the Iraq War in the early 2000s when I was in college, and and then after that, I really wasn't for a very long time. I would pretty much the whole time I was in graduate school more or less. The only political activity I really did was reading Glenn Greenwald columns in Salon and using them as a cheat sheet to argue with my liberal friends at the bar about drones and civil liberties. But but then like a lot of people who had those kinds of political impulses, I think I was politically reactivated by the first Bernie campaign in 2016. Maybe a little bit by some of what was going on, or like a few years earlier with the first kind of big wave of police brutality protests in Ferguson and elsewhere. My wife and I were living, in Korea while all of that was happening. I was teaching at Yonsei University uh, at in Seoul. The campus I was at was kind of in the suburbs of Seoul, so I was disconnected from that. But I mean, I think that kind of got me to be more politically engaged than I had been. And then when the first Bernie campaign happened, um, that's when that's when I joined DSA, and I think everything else that I've done has kind of come out of that.
That's cool. So what got you interested in logic in arguments, and more specifically, what made you want to mix politics with logic? Because whenever I first saw you on the Michael Brooks show a few years ago, I was taking a logic and critical thinking class in college, and you were talking about some of the different things that we were talking about in my class. But in my class, we were talking about like boring, uninteresting things. But
Yeah.
for you, you were talking about politics, so I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And so, how did you get into doing that?
Yeah, I mean, so those two things were on completely separate tracks for me for a very long time. So I guess I realized um, that I gave a very incomplete answer to your question about how I became a leftist, which is part of that's because in some ways I'm not sure, right? It goes back so far, it's a little bit hard to say. But in any case, I had, even though I did have, very left wing views and socialist views, I by the time, I was starting up graduate school, like I said earlier, I pretty much stopped, you know, doing much of anything about it, right? Like I had. Back in 2002, 2003, I'd gone to a bunch of anti-war protests, and I helped organize some anti-war protests, and I was, involved a little bit marginally in electoral politics, the kind that existed for the far left back then, which meant the Green Party, back in like 2003, 2004. But then by the time I was really starting grad school, uh, I was kind of disengaging from all of that. I think mostly because it all seemed so marginal and like it was never. I mean, not that this was really a thought out conscious decision. I think it's more just that I was doing other things with my life. But I think that everything did seem so marginal back then, and like it was never really going anywhere, that it probably didn't have much hold on me. Uh, and uh, and then as far as logic goes, I kind of decided to major in philosophy in college, just by trial and error. I didn't really, I didn't really have a clear idea of what I wanted to do, and so I think those were just like the classes that I found the most interesting or did the best in. And then really going to graduate school at all, I think was mostly just a matter of not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. And it's like, well, I enjoy this, so I could get paid to keep doing this for a few more years, and then who knows, we'll see what happens. And especially because by the time I was finishing up undergrad, I was working full time at Meijer, which is a big like Walmart-ish grocery store chain in Michigan and Ohio. And I was loading and unloading boxes for 8 hours a day, which is exactly as fascinating as it sounds. And thought, oh, okay, hey, if I went to grad school, I could, I mean, whatever. Maybe I get a job when I get out. Maybe I don't. But meanwhile, I can get paid to sit on a couch and grade papers. That sounds better than this. And I ended up actually starting. My graduate program a semester late because I failed a class that no excuse whatsoever for failing, mostly because I was so busy with the anti-war stuff. And so normally my master's program at Western Michigan, the way it worked was during your first year, uh, you were a TA, and then during your second year you taught your own classes. And I wasn't sure how it was going to work with me because I started in January, and then in like March they posted the schedule for fall, and I just kind of happened to look through it just out of curiosity. I was flipping through it, and I saw Philosophy 225, Deductive Logic, Burgis. I thought, oh shit, I guess that's what I'm doing in the fall. And because I'd never actually taken a symbolic logic course as an undergrad, I went to a very small college that didn't have one, and so I spent the summer teaching myself, symbolic logic out of the textbook I was going to use in the fall, And I'm sure the students those first semesters, I don't know how much they could have learned from that because I barely knew what I was talking about. But it got the process of teaching it got me interested enough that I ended up writing my doctoral dissertation on logical paradoxes, and so that was always like what my academic interest was. But then politically, most of what I did, I mean, up until like 20, uh, sometime in 2016, was just like argue with people on social media, right? That's what I did. That was what counted as political engagement for me. And but I did I did do a lot of that, and then I was writing a book that actually still hasn't come out yet, mostly because I've been so busy with everything else. But it was um, loosely based on my dissertation. It's called "Logic Without Gaps or Gluts: How to Solve the Paradoxes Without Sacrificing Classical Logic." And so I was posting about that all the time, uh, and uh, and so I would post like, oh, just got another 500 words done on the logic book, whatever. And as a separate thing, I mean, this is kind of a weird explanation, but it's what happened. My friend Doug Lane, who's now the editor of Zero Books, so which is the publishing company that published my book. You mentioned Michael earlier; it's also the company that published his book. So I had known Doug since before he got that job, and he was organizing this conference about Jordan Peterson because he'd actually had Peterson had agreed, was scheduled to be on Doug's podcast, and then he or somebody on his team must have gotten a whiff of what his politics were, and there was going to be a very unfriendly interview, and they pulled out, and shortly, like a week or something after Peterson's people canceled his appearance on the podcast, Peterson was on Joe Rogan, and he said, and Rogan asked, "Oh, why do you never debate any of these equality of outcome Marxists you're always talking about?" And Peterson said, "Oh, it's because none of them want to debate me." And that annoyed Doug so much he organized this conference as Jordan Peterson, a conference in lieu of a debate. And since I had been spending a lot of time arguing with people on Facebook about Jordan Peterson, because people who were like friends or family members of mine, had gotten interested in him, and I would and it all annoyed me, and so I spent way too much time reading and thinking about Jordan Peterson to be able to explain why this was all nonsense. So I saw that Doug was organizing this conference, and so I submitted an abstract to the conference, and then I messaged him and said, "Hey Doug, just so you know, I submitted something to your conference." And he said, I think because I'd been posting all the stuff about that book about logic, he was like, "Oh, I was actually wondering if you'd want to write a book for us," and he kind of had about half of the idea already formed for Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, and after he pitched that to me, I mean, I had to kind of spend a couple days thinking about it because I didn't really get at first I didn't quite get what that book would be, but then the more I thought about it, the more the more excited I got about it. I thought this is really a niche, that needs to be filled. And I think, and I started to think that this is something that, that there's a real need for, right? Because I think that there's a certain kind of leftist, who, whatever, I listened to Chapo. I have since it started. And that would be the perfect example, right? Because on Chapo, they'll pretty much any time that there's, I mean, they've kind of stopped doing this the last couple of years, but pretty much every time there was a mention of logic or fallacies or debate or anything like that, it was always a punchline, and I don't want to try to separate out like how much of that was a joke and how much of that like reflected real feelings, because that, for one thing, that's the least funny thing you can do to a joke. But but I think it represents a certain kind of tendency on the left when they, that some people overreact to hearing a lot of logic talk and particularly fallacy talk from a certain kind of super annoying interlocutor. Um, you know, Libertarian, like Twitter trolls, people like that, that they kind of learn to roll their eyes at the mention of it, which I think is a shame. That we shouldn't do that, because if we're interested in putting forward arguments for our positions and responding to arguments for other people's positions, then we should be interested in logic, because logic is just the study of how arguments work and when they succeed in delivering their conclusions and when they don't. And I think we should be interested in putting forward arguments for our positions and responding to right-wing arguments, because for one thing, right now, the vast majority of our fellow Americans are not actually on board with most of the things that we want. And I know that like the really properly hardcore materialist thing is to say that, oh, what'll change their mind is like changing economic circumstances and life experiences. But the problem is we kind of know that those things don't do that on their own.
Yeah.
That people can respond to material circumstances by drawing left-wing conclusions, but people can respond to the same material circumstances by drawing right-wing conclusions. Plenty of there are plenty of laid-off coal miners in West Virginia who responded to worsening material circumstances by voting for Donald Trump. And that's not to say, of course, that people's minds are changed just by the mere existence of good arguments, but I think that it is important as part of the process to have those good arguments at our disposal, for the moments when people are persuadable and open to them, and then I think the other reason that we should care about that is because when disagreements arise on the left, as the lame joke I always make about this is, as they have pretty much once every 15 minutes since the French Revolution, then you can probably think of lots of recent examples. Should socialists hold their noses and vote for Joe Biden, or should they vote third party to try to build some sort of long-term alternative? Should we care about electoral politics at all, or should we only be focused on things going on in the workplace? Should we think of race and class and gender as these separate axes of oppression, or should we think that class is fundamentally different from these other things? Or if you do the second thing, does that make you a class reductionist? Leftists love to be at each other's throats about this stuff, and if your only tools for pushing back against people who disagree with you are mockery or moral condemnation, which is pretty much what you're left with in the absence of arguments, then those are the tools that we're going to turn on each other, and that gets super toxic and alienating to most people. So that's kind of all of what made me think that the book was a good idea, and then everything else kind of came out of there.
All right. That sounds good. So I saw a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a month ago, I'm not sure, but you did a Birdie or Bust debate. I think you did a couple of them with, one of them I remember was with Nico House.
Yep.
How did you feel about that whole debate? And how do you feel about that and this whole debate about people having this whole conversation every 4 years?
Yeah. Well, I guess one thing I'd say is I do, even though I disagree with them, I do sympathize with part of what I think drives the Bernie or Bust crowd, which is that, as you say, this is cyclical. It happens every 4 years, and so like I get why, especially when the way the argument is made to them is this particular Republican is a unique threat. So it's important to put everything else aside to defeat them. That if you hear that every single 4 years, which you do, I'm certainly old enough to remember hearing it a lot about George W. Bush, before Donald Trump, and people who are a lot older than me might remember hearing it about, I don't know, Nixon, right? So I think that that's probably very frustrating, and I'm sure it's also incredibly annoying to see that like somebody like Noam Chomsky, who the mainstream media thoroughly ignores 99% of the time, is wheeled out once every 4 years to say what he always says about elections, and then wheeled back away. And also, I think a lot of the way that people who have my position and I think your position on this, but I think that some people really make the mistake of presenting that position in a way that really feels like condescending or scolding, and that's usually the worst possible way to get somebody to vote the way you want to vote, right? Because most human beings have a very bad reaction to that. All of that said, though, obviously I do think they're wrong. Yeah, I did two debates about this, one with Nico House and one with Conrad Hamilton, who's actually one of my co-authors on Myth and Mayhem, which is a book. Well, whatever. All of our names are on the cover. I wrote like a chapter of it, but it's a book that me and Conrad and Marion Trejo and Matt McManus wrote, actually about Jordan Peterson. To cycle back to that, but in any case, I think that the one with Conrad Hamilton was a little bit better, just because I felt like he was a little bit better than Nico House was at sort of following along with the specific arguments that are being made and kind of staying on topic. But I guess the thing that I generally find a little frustrating about these debates is that so often people with the position that Nico House was defending, and he's not an exception here, will just kind of emphasize these big generalities about the Democrats are terrible, Biden is terrible, which is all true, and everything that they're typically saying to back it up is true. That Empire is a bipartisan project, and we should expect Biden to do a lot of the same things around the world that Obama did or that Clinton did, before him. That the long-term economic, that are causing so much misery, certainly aren't going to be reversed in a Biden administration. All these things are 100% true, but at least what often frustrates me is that the specific argument that I want to make for doing things like holding your nose and voting for Biden, and I think it's only fair to say that this isn't a one-time argument, that this is something that would apply generally, right? Like, there are some unique and disturbing things about Trump, but for the most part, most of the reasons that I don't want Trump to be president, given the choice between him and even a mediocre centrist Democrat, are also reasons I wouldn't have wanted Mitt Romney to be president. Because if a Republican is president, that means that the Republican machine is in control of the executive branch instead of the Democratic machine. And I think the difference between those two is important. So I think it's important for harm reduction reasons, and it's also important, which we can certainly get into. We got one very small. Well, actually, we got a couple of examples that just in the last week, since losing the election, the Trump administration has been rushing to do a bunch of things, to as little parting gifts, for the last couple of months that it's going to be in office. One of those was freezing wages for farm workers. Another one was imposing a whole shit ton of new sanctions on Iran. And so I think that those, and part of the point of that second one, by the way, is to make it harder for the Biden administration if it decides to try to get back the Iran deal that was negotiated by Obama. So those things, I think, make a difference in terms of harm reduction, right? The key word being reduction, which is to say that most of the evil things that the U.S. government does will be done regardless of which party's in power. But I think there's a real gap there, and we should care about that gap. And then the other reason is a strategic reason, which is that I think that it's better for the left for the Democratic machine to be in office than the Republican machine to be in office, not because I'm under any illusions that the Democratic establishment, agrees with us or, is sort of aligned with us or is just like kind of a flawed version of us or anything like that. I'm not. But because I think that you can acknowledge that both the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment are trying in their own ways to serve ruling class interests and still say that they're pursuing very different strategies for doing that. And those strategies should make a difference to us. So I think they make a difference discursively. What I mean by that is I think they make a difference in terms of just what the political discourse is like. That I think if there's a ostentatiously awful right-wing Republican in office, oppositional energy tends to get directed towards that person as a person. Right? If we just got rid of that person, right, we'd be fine. Whereas, with a mediocre centrist Democrat in office, a lot of that oppositional energy ends up going to deeper issues. So I'm very confused when I hear leftists say, well, there was opposition during Bush, but then everybody went to sleep under Obama. And I always think, well, what are you talking about? Occupy Wall Street happened under Obama. Black Lives Matter started under Obama. Bernie Sanders won 22 states, while Obama was president. None of that is to give Obama credit for any of those things, but I do think that reason that I just mentioned might be a reason why those things happen then. And so that's the discursive half of the equation. And then I think the practical half is that the Republicans just represent a much more aggressive strategy for managing the system. So one issue that I think should be of particular concern to the left is the labor movement, because any successful socialist movement has to have a organized working class at its base. And if you look at the people that Donald Trump has appointed to the National Labor Relations Board, they're like hardcore union busters who have made all kinds of rulings that reverse precedents that were set during the Obama administration, and always in the direction of making it harder to organize unions, harder for unions that are already up and running to do their thing. So I think that just gives us like a good practical strategic reason to, whether it's Trump versus Biden or Trump versus Clinton or Romney versus Obama or McCain versus Obama, like that those things give us a reason to think that it would be strategically better for us if the Democrat was in office. And I understand the frustration with saying, oh, well, you have to continue to make this awful choice, at least in swing states, between the lesser evil and the greater evil. And I get that, but I think that it's not really serious to think that we can change that situation, that we can create an electorally viable third party by just sort of willing it into existence. That if 2% of the population that are hardcore leftists just want it bad enough, we can somehow materialize it. I don't think that's how it works. That I think the only possible scenario where we'd actually get an electorally viable third party is if one of the existing parties collapsed the way that the Whigs collapsed in the 19th century, creating the Republicans. And I don't think you can just will that into existence. So all of which is very long-winded, probably because like I'm still like have the momentum of like spending so much of the last month arguing about this, but I guess I would say to more directly answer your question that what frustrates me is like when I make that like really focused argument, like, hey, here are the specific reasons why this matters, whether Democrats or Republicans are in control of the executive branch. And what I get back are just sort of generalities about how the Democrats are really bad. It's like, yeah, but dude, I mean, I agree with you, but that doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I'm kind of done. I'm glad that the election's over because I'm tired of getting ratioed whenever I tweet out about this kind of stuff. But yeah. So what's been going on your new podcast, and are you working on any new books?
Yes, on both. Well, yes on the second one. The first is a yes or no question. But yeah, what's been going on in my new podcast? So lots of good stuff. Really picking up steam. I've the episode that, as we're recording this on Tuesday night, just premiered last night, has Matt Chrisman from Chapo Trap House and Glenn Greenwald, formerly The Intercept, on it. So check that out. Also, just today, I recorded the first of what I hope we're going to do as a continuing monthly series of bonus episodes, which recapping The Sopranos, just my favorite TV show, and I've been doing that. Well, whatever, I've done one so far, but they're on board, for the rest of them, with Nando Vila and Wozni Lambre, Big Woz, and Mike Racine from the Sit Down, and we said, at the beginning of it, that if anybody's listening to these like monthly bonus episodes and they think, oh, okay, well, when are they going to get to like, the deep Marxist analysis of The Sopranos or something? That's not what this is, right? Like these are just like joyfully apolitical bonus episodes. Been enjoying that. Lots of other good stuff like that coming up. Books. Yeah. I am actually working on, very early stages in both cases. But I'm actually working on two books, one just by myself and one co-authored. The one just by myself is for Zero Books. It's called Christopher Hitchens: What He Got Right, How He Went Wrong, and Why He Still Matters. You mentioned earlier, watch it be on TMBS, so you probably saw some of the throwback segments we did there about him, which doing those kind of inspired me to get the idea for that book. And that one, with any luck, is going to be coming out, if I can finish it fast enough, next winter, like winter 2021. And then the co-authored one is it's actually it's going to be called The Blueprint, and it is being co-authored with Bhaskar Sankara, who's my editor at Jacobin, and Mike Beggs, who's an economist in Australia. And I might be getting all we have so far is a proposal, but I might be getting the subtitle slightly wrong, but it's like The Blueprint: How Socialism Could Work in the Real World. And it's an attempt to sort of go through like the real like nitty gritty of how a socialist society could work that would we'd avoid the sort of economic problems that existed in Soviet style systems in the 20th century. So and that one does not, it's just been picked up by an agent. It doesn't have a publisher yet. I'm guessing probably Verso when it comes out, and whatever, God knows, 2022 sometime probably.
All right. And my last question that I have here is, what kind of music do you listen to?
Yeah. Well, I like a few kinds of music. Uh, so yeah, I guess if this is audio only, people can't see. I'm wearing a Rolling
No,
Stones
it's
t-shirt right now.
video. It's video. It'll
Oh, it's
be
video.
video
Okay.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's there's the Rolling Stones t-shirt on right now. Um, I am so I like a few different genres of music a lot. I'm obviously a huge classic rock fan. Nothing that I mean, all of the I think most of that's pretty predictable. Love the Stones, love Zeppelin, love Ozzy era Black Sabbath, um, and we just for fun, it goes the ranking goes Ozzy era Sabbath, Ozzy solo, Dio solo, Dio era Black Sabbath, uh, and I like, well, I guess on one end, kind of going chronologically back from classic rock, I like a lot of blues. Big Robert Johnson fan, big Howlin' Wolf fan. I Blind Willie McTell, people like that, and going in the other direction chronologically, uh, I I like metal, but I don't like the sort of I'm not like a death metal fan particularly. I like anything that's sung in the metal like roar. I'm probably not particularly into. So I guess stoner metal. I like I like Metallica. I like uh, I already mentioned Sabbath. And Ozzy solo. I I like some contemporary stuff that's kind of in that vein, like Orange Goblin, and then I guess moving chronologically a little bit forward, I like some kinds of indie rock, your Modest Mouse of Montreal, Fire Furnaces, stuff like that. And also, as anybody who listens to the podcast know, I like classic like outlaw country. Talk about it a lot with David Griscom on the show. And I guess kind of in the same vein as the outlaw country, it's like I think it scratches a very similar itch for me. There's like a good amount of Irish music that I like. The Pogues, Flogging Molly, stuff like that, which I sort of put in the same category. That kind of like you know very narrative music, often about tragedy. That pairs well with drinking.
Were you ever into corn?
I was not, but to be completely fair, I never really bothered to listen to very much. I mean, I like honestly, my main association with Corn is I remember there was like an ancient South Park episode that the
Yes.
band featured it.
Yeah. No, because I remember a few weeks ago, whenever I commented saying that I said Korn was better than Metallica, you said you thought I was kidding. I'm like, no, I'm not.
Fair enough.
But yeah. Well, thank you for coming
Sure.
on. Where can we find you on social media, and where can we find your podcast?
Yeah. So, well, the easiest thing to do is just to go to benburgis.com. That's benburgis.com. And you'll find links to everything there. And like I said, that's the easiest to remember thing. But the podcast is available as a podcast in all the usual podcast places, Apple and Google and all those. And it also premieres on YouTube every Monday night at 7:30 Eastern. Um, and that's the YouTube channel is youtube.com/Ben Burgis GTAA. Although again, if you don't remember all of that, just benburgess.com. That's probably easiest to remember.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks, Gregory.